The Wasgau is a Franco-German hill range in the German state of Rhineland-Palatinate and the French departments of Bas-Rhin and Moselle. It is formed from the southern part of the Palatine Forest and the northern part of the Vosges Mountains, and extends from the River Queich in the north over the French border to the Col de Saverne in the south. The highest hill in the entire Wasgau is the Grand Wintersberg near Niederbronn-les-Bains in northern Alsace.Next, at 577 meters, is the only slightly lower Rehberg near Annweiler in the South Palatinate, which is the highest summit on German soil in the Wasgau. The Wasgau forms the southern part of the Palatine Forest North Vosges Biosphere Reserve. Geography. Location. The Wasgau runs from a line between Pirmasens and Lantus in the north that, from Wilgartswissen, coincides with the course of the River Queich, to the Col de Saverne, and a line between Pfalzberg to Saverne in the south. Its eastern boundary, running from Annweiler in the Queich Valley via Bad Bergzabern, Wissembourg in Alsace and Niederbronn-les-Bains to Saverne, is the edge of the Rhine-Graben. In the west, the hills transition smoothly into the landscape region of the Westrich Plateau. From the younger rock strata of the Muschelkalk cover the Bunter sandstone that dominates the Wasgau. This natural boundary runs roughly from Pirmasens via Eppenbrunn, Bitch and Lemberg in Lorraine towards the south and, near Pfalzberg, finally reaches the fault zone of the narrow Col de Saverne. This separates the Wasgau from the real Vosges immediately to the south. Although this transition is rather gradual and the dividing line not particularly clear, a central sub-region of the Wasgau is the Annweiler Wasgau Felsenland, which extends from the Queich Valley near Annweiler in the northeast to the area of the Falkensteiner Bachstreamens Insel du Nord near Bärental, and Philipsburg in the southwest. Structure. The uplands of the Wasgau differ from those of the central Palatine Forest that border it to the north. The landscape of the Wasgau has a characteristically variable nature, with numerous conical hills as well as clearly rounded domes. Between the hills are conspicuously level plains, some of them extensive. The Wasgau is drained mostly towards the east by left-hand tributaries of the River Rhine, namely the Queich, the Lauter and the Saarbach, which continues as the Saar in North Alsace. Sets. There it is followed by the Moder, whose catchment area extends southwards via its right-hand tributary, the Zorn. Beyond the Col de Saverne, there are no natural lakes in the Wasgau, but especially in the area of the Saarbach Stem, historic ponds or wugs have survived from the Middle Ages. These are small lakes that were artificially created to breed fish or to utilize the water in the operation of water mills or iron hammer mills. The water of the Insel du Nord near Bärental in the Pays de Bitche was used during the 18th and 19th centuries for processing iron in the ironworks and blast furnaces. To that end, several larger and smaller ponds were laid out between Mauterhouse and Bärental, which have been mainly used for tourism since the closure of the last ironworks in 1923. Even the Etang de Hanau, a pond a few miles east of Bitche in Egulshart, has become a major tourist center with swimming facilities, boat rentals and camping. Splash dams were constructed, for example on the Wieslauder stream, as part of the timber rafting industry that was practiced until the end of the 19th century. These dams were able to trap logs after temporary flooding, which, after the opening of a weir, could be transported downstream on the water. Hills. General. Due to its small-scale relief, the uplands of the Wasgau are characterized by considerable diversity of forms with rather isolated individual peaks, particularly the conical hills of Kegelberge, which reach an average height of 400 to 500 meters above sea level. The highest peaks are in the northern and central Wasgau, especially near the edge of the Rhine trough, while the Bunter sandstone block in the west and south descends from about 500 meters to an average of about 350 to 400 meters at the Saverne. Also typical is the number of variably shaped rock formations, mainly rocks of the lower Triassic sandstone, the Trifels and Rehberg beds, that are found on many hills in the Wasgau. In his typology of mountain and rock formations of the Wasgau, Geiger distinguishes the following 6 forms: hill blocks with rock outcrops, table hills, rock slabs, ridges with rock faces, hill cones with rock blocks, hill cones with rock towers and domed hills. In addition, there is a host of hilltop observation towers that offer visitors a 360 degrees panorama. Detailed overview. The columns in the table are based on the natural region division concept of the Wasgau. Each column shows the important hills of each subregion in order of height. Geology, formation and deposition of the rock strata of the Wasgau, as part of the Palatine Forest and the North Vosges, is characterized by rock strata of Bunter sandstone and, to a lesser extent, zechstein, which was deposited in the late Permian and early Triassic, predominantly under desert-like climatic conditions. Sedimentary sequences were formed with a thickness of about 500 meters, of different strengths, thicknesses and coloring, and comprising mainly strongly hardened, silica-cemented, medium and coarse-grained sandstones, but also some fine-grained sandstones, bonded with clay cement, and shales. These rocks are divided into various strata that, in the case of the Bunter sandstone region, comprise lower, middle, and upper levels. During the formation of the Upper Rhine Graben in the Paleogene period, these rock strata experienced tectonically induced displacements that have had a significant impact on the appearance of the landscape of the Wasgau today. At the time, the edges of the Rhine Graben were uplifted and the layers of Bunter sandstone and, in places also older rocks were exposed after the overlying rock was eroded away. This resulted in tilting, bulging and the fracturing of the various rock strata. Development of the present topography due to the synclinal-anticlinal structure of the hills on the left bank of the Rhine, which runs from southwest to northeast. These bulges in the northern and central parts of the Wasgau, i.e. in the region of the South Palatinate saddle, are particularly prominent, with the result that the surface layers were more heavily eroded, because the formations of the zechstein, for example, the Annweiler and Spelubach beds, consist more of fine-grained sandstones with clay binding and shales and therefore have a softer consistency. This material could be more easily carried away, leaving the older rocks of the zechstein and Rotliagens exposed. This resulted in erosion surfaces and broad valleys, as are particularly characteristic of the northeastern Wasgau, for example, in Gossesweiler and Volkasweiler, also in Hauenstein, Bisenberger Fischbach bei Dan. At the same time, parts of the lower Bunter sandstone, the so-called Trifels and Rehberg beds, remain, because they mostly consist of harder quartz sandstone and therefore particularly resistant to weathering and erosion. The microrelief of the Wasgau was developed during the Neogene period, and especially the Quaternary period, as a result of erosion, that is characterized by diversely shaped, often conical and isolated hills with bizarre rock formations. This rock country extends from Annweiler in the northeast roughly to the stream of the Falkensteiner Bach at Philipsburg in the southwest and forms the actual core area of the Wasgau. Had the rock strata been undisturbed, The typical landscape structure of the rock country would end shortly after Annweiler due to their inclination. Tectonic processes, however, led to the shifting and displacement of individual layers of rock so that, west of the Elmstein fault roughly from Wilgartswiesen, Spiegelbach, Schwanheim, Erlenbach, Niederschlettenbach up to Lembach in Alsace, the rock-forming trifels beds were uplifted by about 80 to 100 meters, and so these rocks continue to shape the surface of the landscape in the Dahnefelsenland and Schonaufelsenland. Only west of the Lauter and Sauer-Saarbach do they dive permanently beneath the younger strata of the Middle Buntersandstein, for example, the Karlstal beds, so that the landscape of the western Wasgau appears similar to that of the Middle Palatinate forest. This also applies to the southern part of Wasgau because, in the area of the Col de Saverne Fultzberg Trough, the various rock formations are less strongly arched and therefore the surface layers were not as severely eroded. For this reason, younger rocks of the Middle and Upper Bunter form the surface of the hills, whilst Rehberg and trifels beds only occur in deep V-shaped valleys. Also, south of a line from Annweiler through Wingen zur Moder to Diemeringen, the main distribution zone of Bunter sandstone from the eastern edge of the trough to the rocks of the lower Muschelkalk in the west narrows from a width of about 15 kilometers to a minimum of 7 kilometers in the area of the Col de Saverne. Name and history. The names Wasgau and Vosges have the same linguistic source. The originally Celtic hill and forest god, Vosges, who was adopted by the Romans who incorporated it into the Latin names for the region, Vosges Mons and Silver Vosges. This name became the French Vosges and the Middle High German Wasgen, which further evolved into Wasgau and Wasgenval. Linguistically, these terms are also related to the Vosges region, which is adjacent to the Vosges to the southwest, whose name derives from the feminine form *Vosgia. Gradually the names branched and developed separately due to the Franco-German border. Today the Alsace-Lorraine part of the range is called the Vosges and the Palatine part is the Wasgau. During the time from 1871 to 1919, when Alsace and parts of Lorraine temporarily belonged to Germany, the Vosges was generally referred to as the Wasgenwald in order to emphasize the distance from the Roman Latin term. As part of the European Treaty, however, there is now a tendency to go the opposite way. Both parts of the range are seen as a single, cross-border, natural, regional and cultural historical unit. So in addition to the use of the official landscape names of Vosges du Nord and Sud like Pfalzerwald, the range is called by the overall term of Wasgau of Ascavi, in keeping with the historical development of the name. These terms are used not just for the Palatine, but also for the Alsace-Lorraine part of the region. The so-called south route of the historic Way of St. James used to run through the Wasgau. Today it is more of touristic rather than religious significance. Sites, castles. Of the numerous castles in the region, several have written history. Trifels Castle, which was partially restored during the 20th century, was where the imperial regalia were kept for a time during the Middle Ages, together with the castles of Annebos and Schaffenburg. Trifels is the symbol of Annweiler. The Warstein Castle, owned by the legendary knight Hans von Trotha, called Hans Trap, has been restored, is occupied and managed. Drachenfels Castle was destroyed because part of it had belonged to the rebellious knight Franz von Sickingen. Other castles of the region include Lemberg, Neudahn, Maddenberg. Castles of Dahn, consisting of Altdahn, Grafendain and Tanstein, Landeck, Lindelbrunn, Wegelnberg, Hohenberg and Lohenstein, Fleckenstein, Blumenstein, Warsigenstein, Falkenstein, Wasenberg, Lichtenberg, Hunberg, Rock formations. Shapes. The Wasgau Felsenland is rich in bizarre sandstone rock formations, which have been formed over the millennia by the weathering and erosion of strata of differing hardness belonging to the lower and middle Bunter. In the Palatine part of the Wasgau alone there are over 200 rock massifs and freestanding rock pinnacles. Depending on the erosion of the Trifels, Rehberg and Karlstal beds they are classified as rock terraces, rock faces and rock walls. Other rock forms are pinnacles and blocks, which are mainly found on top of conical hills. Small-scale weathering of narrow strata with varying hardness has produced rock openings, rock gateways, rock columns and rock tables. On many rocks, for example, the almost 2-kilometer-long rock terrace of the Altschlossfelsen near Eppenbrunn, cornice-like overhangs and honeycomb weathering may also be seen. Many castles in the Wasgau were built on rock terraces or blocks of rock. Especially prominent examples of the Castle Trinity of Trifels are Nebos and Schaffenberg near Annweiler and Lindelbrunn Castle, a few kilometers to the southwest. Well-known rock castles also include the Berwarstein near Erlenbach, the Drachenfels near Bisenberg and the Fleckenstein near Herstal and Lembach. Fauna and flora. From a botanical perspective, many rock regions form biotopes with particularly hardy and undemanding sandstone vegetation that is mainly composed of mountain pine, common heather and simple grasses, and, in wet areas, also mosses and ferns. In addition, since the 1980s, peregrine falcons have settled on a host of rocks, so that restrictions have had to be introduced for climbers, walkers and special users. In order to avoid conflicts of usage, these regulations are laid down annually by the Palatine Climbing Association and the Palatine Conservation Clubs of NABU, sports climbers and walkers. The Wasgau Felsenland offers sports climbers a variety of different options which, thanks to the highly variable nature and weathering of sandstone rock, offer a wide range of climbing grades. Well-known climbing areas include the regions around Annweiler, Lug and Hauenstein, as well as the Dahn and Erfweiler regions, to which the well-known Barenbrunner Tal belongs. In order to enable walkers to experience this rock landscape at closer hand, in recent years a range of themed walks has been established. In the Wasgau these include the Dahn Rock Path, the Bisenberg Clog Path, the Hauenstein Cobbler Path and the Annweiler Red Sandstone Path. Whilst most rocks remain the province of professional climbers, certain rock terraces may be accessed on foot, may be climbed with care, with the aid of ladders and steps. Gallery. Amongst the other attractions of the Wasgau are the Biosphere House with its adjacent tree walk in Fischbach, the Südliche Weinstraße Wildlife Park in Sils, the German Shoe Museum, the Glass Shoe Factory in Hauenstein and the administrative centre of the North Vosges Nature Park in La Petite Pierre, which has an exhibition of the Palatine Forest North Vosges Biosphere Reserve. Also in La Petite Pierre is the Alsace Museum and a local history museum. Another attraction of the rock dwellings a few kilometers south of La Petite Pierre in Graufthal, in 3 houses that are built into the rock face. Up to 37 people have lived over the centuries. After the death of the last inhabitant in 1958, the rock dwellings were preserved as a cultural monument and may be viewed today as an open-air museum. Economy and infrastructure. Settlement. About 237,000 inhabitants live in the Palatine Forest North Vosges Biosphere Reserve, spread over 215 municipalities, with a total area of 3,105 square kilometers. This gives a population density of slightly more than 76 inhabitants per square kilometer. On the German side, the density is high, with an average of 89 inhabitants per square kilometre, but, on the French side, it drops to just 59 inhabitants per square kilometre. The Biosphere Reserve includes not only the actual forest-covered mountains, but also densely populated areas along the edge of the Rheingraben and the Westreich Plateau. If these areas are excluded to leave the area of the actual natural region itself, the population density is only about 20 to 30 inhabitants per square kilometre, which, for Central Europe, are extremely low values. For example, the population density for the whole of Germany is 229 persons per square kilometre. Similarly, the number of settlements is lower in the natural region. The German part of the Wasgau has only about 50 and the French part about 40, i.e. a total of about 90 communities. These relatively small settlements only occupy 5% of the total area, and are surrounded by vast desolate forests, and lie mainly in the valleys and on the plateau of the low mountain range. Exceptions are upland villages such as Kleinmark in the eastern Hochwald, Lviv in the Palatinate and in Lorraine, and, in the southwest, the tourist destination of La Petite Pierre, the latter settlements being in the high, plateau-like, transition region between the red sandstone landscape of the Wasgau and the limestone formations of the Westreich Plateau. Other, larger settlements on the German side are Annweiler, Trifels, Dun and Hauenstein. On the French, in addition to the aforementioned places, are the villages of Lembach, Obersteinbach, Niedersteinbach and Wingen-sur-Moder. The eastern edge of the range includes the settlements of Albersweiler and Bad Bergzabern in the Palatinate, and Wissembourg, Niederbronn-les-Bains, Ingwiller and Saverne in Alsace. In the southwest and northwest running strip on the edge of the Wasgau lie the settlements of Pfalzberg and Bitch in Lorraine, and Eppenbrunn and Pirmasens in the Palatinate, the last named being the largest town on the edge of the Wasgau. Economy: iron production and processing, which was important in earlier times, came to an end in the late 19th century. A number of so-called geonanth fountains bear witness to this traditional industry today. In the 19th and 20th centuries, forestry-related industry and small businesses dominated, especially those involved in shoe manufacturing. After the Second World War, the shoe industry waned and the economy increasingly turned to tourism, which has now become the main source of income. In addition to mere relaxation, active holidays are offered. For example, climbing in the South Palatinate climbing area or hiking. There are several well-maintained cycle paths that mainly follow the valleys in the Wasgau. Transport: in addition to the main transport artery of the B10 Federal Highway along the northern edge of the Wasgau, the region is accessible on the Palatine side in the east from the B48, from Annweiler to Bad Bergzabern, and in the west and south via the B427, from Hinterweidenthal via Dun to Bad Bergzabern. On the other side of the border, the well-developed Departement Road, the D662, along the western edge of the Wasgau, links Bitch with Niederbronn-les-Bains and Hagenau in the Rhine plain. The A4 motorway from Paris to Strasbourg and the D604 cross the Col de Saverne, right in the south of the natural region. The railway line from Pirmasens to Landau, the Queich Valley Railway, which runs parallel to the B10, was once part of the trunk route between Saarbrücken and Munich, but has been repeatedly downgraded in importance. On the Wieslauter Railway in the west there are excursion services on Sundays and holidays. The line from Saarbrücken via Sarreguemines through the valley of the Moder to Strasbourg mainly serves regional traffic. Currently under construction is the TGV link between Paris and Strasbourg, which will cross under the Col de Saverne through a tunnel.